Um, okay, so let's define evolution, the term evolution. Evolution, according to Dawkins, was when we see a gene increasing or decreasing. That's what we mean by evolution. Now, this is called equivocation. We know um, that evolution is not that. That's variation. That's species variation, kinds becoming species. That's what creation believes. This is not evolution. We all creationists would be evolutionists if that was actually the case. No, the argument is it's not whether genes are increasing or decreasing in frequency. That is what is observed in science. What is evolution has to prove is, does kinds, different types of creatures become uh, form from one to the other? Do kinds change? Not do kinds have variation. That's not evolution. So anyway, Dawkins is trying to using two meanings for the same word, and that's very false. So when he says, I see evolution happening in my lab, it's a fact, he's talking about variation within a kind, and people who are listening to him are thinking he's talking about kind to kind, ape to man, uh, fish to amphibian to vertebrates. So this is the thing he's evolution has to try and prove. Variation is a biblical model as well. You can't prove your evolution from that evidence, from what's happening with genetics, just small variation. Dawkins has also been said to say this: evolution has been observed, it's just it hasn't been observed while it's happening. So this is the silly semantic games that is played by these guys. Evolution has not been observed because they've never seen a kind change into another kind, but they have seen variation within species, exactly what the Bible would predict. Now, this is actually the case of what evolution has to try and do. It has to try and say that you have a small cell and it has a small amount of information. It has to evolve into another creature, a more complex creature, and it has to increase its information from small amount of information to more information. This is what evolution must prove is happening by mutations. Um, this is what is having a simple cell just change into variate within itself is not any evolution at all. That's just variation within the species, within its kind, which is exactly what we would expect to happen. Okay, so let's have a look at what's actually happening here and what Darwin, like Darwin and Dawkins and all that, when they're playing the equivocation game, what they're saying and what actually evolution actually has to do. We have two dogs at the top here, medium-sized dogs with large S and small s. So large S is for becoming large and small for smaller type. Two mediums, they have some offspring. So their offspring from one generation could have two small s's, so a small and a medium-sized dog with same as them. Okay, and that's in one generation. Now, alternatively, they could also have two large S dogs where they are actually very, very large size dogs. So this could happen all within just one variation. This is variation within the species. We would have assumed that the biblical kinds were like this, with much variation, and they would have incredible amounts of speciation happening from that. Okay, that's what biblical accounts actually expect. So now when we go down the large dogs and we keep breeding them, and they keep having large dogs, Has this here increased its information? Has all this increased its information? These two? No, not at all. The original dogs had far more information than these dogs. These dogs have now lost information. They have only got can only produce large dogs. They have not got the ability to produce small dogs, which is what was happening here. So when we look at the biblical creation, we realize the biblical created types should have lots of speciation, but they specialize and they lose more and more as they specialize down, just like we see with dogs. Have they evolved? No. It's not an uphaul information, it's a loss of information. So has the information gone from less to more? No, it's gone the other way. It's downhill. It's actually gone from more to less. So is evolution going uphill? Is it actually doing this to greater complexity? No, it's actually getting less information. Okay, so evolution needs to manage to do this, go downhill, uphill, not downhill. Okay, so that's the problem for evolution. It doesn't know how to it doesn't know how to do this. So if we go down to the proposed mechanisms is mutations, and there are lots of mutations. And myostatin deficiency that stops muscle growth is a mutation, and these could be considered beneficial mutations or advantages in something. But have they increased? Has this mutation increased information? No, it's downhill. It's not uphill mutation. When we look at cows, the same mutation. We get the normal cows and the mutated type. Is it uphill, downhill? No, it's loss of information. So again, it's gone from the created to a mutated and smaller amount of information. So it's downhill progress. When we look at a whole heap of different types of animals that have been promoted as having beneficial mutations, we see that in no case at all is there been any uphill information change. It's all downhill information where no information has been added. A beetle that has lost its ability to fly might have an advantage on a windy island there, where his brothers get blown into the sea, and so it has a natural selection operates on it, and it has a survival benefit. But has it got more information? No, it's a loss of information again. Evolution needs uphill, not downhill. And so we have a problem there. What about a fish that's lost its eye? Is that a loss of information? Of course it is. It had an eye and it's lost its eye. It's mutated and it's lost its eye. Is it an advantage? Yes, it could be an advantage in a dark cave where it could damage its eyes. If it doesn't need its eyes and it damages its eyes, it could be injured. So having no eyes might be an advantage, but it's still it shows no evolution at all. It shows just loss of information and a mutation downwards. A flightless bird, yes, could be an advantage if there's no predators to kill it. Again, but it's a loss of information. So all these beneficial mutations show categorically there is no increased information which evolution is needing. Okay, when we look at the inherited diseases, the 1,000 or so inherited diseases, we can look at sickle cell anemia, and that's been proposed as a beneficial mutation. But a person dies at an average of 42 years of age when they get it, and their warped hemoglobin cells, yeah, sure, they don't get malaria, but they're actually sick, and they are nowhere near as healthy as a person without sickle cell anemia. So if you had the choice between being healthy, having sickle cell anemia or not, you would always choose that I don't want it, thanks, because it is a mutation. It might have some benefit in some situations, but it has no benefit in reality. Mutations really do. So there are all these different mutations, And if you went to the hospital and a doctor said to you, you have a mutation, you wouldn't go, hooray, I'm evolving and becoming better. You'd be actually concerned because no one really believes mutations are good for you. Okay. And what about mutations acting with natural selection? The randomness of it, for one, mutations are really random. They're clumps. They appear clumps in the genetic areas. They're actually not just everywhere in the genetic code. They're majorly in certain areas they appear, and the actual chances of each one mutating into a certain type of cytosine, thymine, etc., and having copying errors, they're not random to which letter they go into. That also has high percentage of chance. Some are far more higher percentage chance to copy into. So it's not exactly as random as evolutionists have been saying. The natural selection is supposed to be directing this and making it even less random. But the problem is natural selection can't act upon the majority of mutations that are near neutral. There are majority of mutations are near the neutral area, which natural selection doesn't actually wouldn't notice. But there's more on the negative side, and these accumulate because they can't be selected upon. So natural selection not only it can't actually get rid of the negative mutations, so they actually build up. And then there's a problem when there's too many genetic mutations that are bad that natural selection can't get rid of. And in most modeling situations, computer modeling examples, the creatures become extinct because natural selection cannot get rid of the neutral and bad mutations that are not being selected for. The beneficial ones are so rare that they are overrun by the negative and the neutral. So any beneficial ones are really eliminated. When studies have been done on creatures that have amazingly highly evolved, apparent highly evolved protection mechanisms, natural selection has found that they have really no real use, and they aren't really being an advantage at all in actual studies. We're talking about the camouflage butterflies versus the white butterflies. Studies have shown they actually have hardly any use at all when it comes to the natural selection. So that's a real problem. Big problems for evolution here for natural selection and mutation. But Dawkins says again, I see it happening in my lab. Again, what's he observing? He's not observing this type of evolution. He's observing variation, which the biblical model actually predicts. What about, Dawkins would say, I see it in my lab. What's an example he would say creationists deny? Antibiotic resistance. Okay, so Dawkins says here, many bacteria have evolved resistance to antibiotics in short periods of time, and etc., etc. And he's saying this is strong evidence for evolution. Well, the thing is, the guy who invented antibiotic resistance, Ernest Chain, he actually says evolution, he rejects it and says it is a feeble attempt based on flimsy assumptions, mainly morphological and anatomical nature. Hardly can be called a theory, and I would rather believe in fairy tales than this wild speculation. There is a lot of wild speculation in evolutionary theory because basically they have to think, oh, this could happen. So it's all this could happen. It's it's wishful thinking more than likely. Anyway, let's have a look at antibiotic resistance. But Ernest Cain, the antibiotic discoverer, actually rejects it. So what about antibiotic? What about was Dawkins right? No, antibiotic resistance can happen in a number of ways. Bacteria are actually a kind of amazing. They can actually swap, it seems, um, information between each other, so they can pass it from one to the other. And this isn't though. The interesting part about it is the information hasn't evolved. The information has to already be present. So it's not evolving information, it's actually present information. But that's one way bacteria become immune. Again, it's not increasing information as such because it already has to be available in the population. The other way that it happens is, say you're using antibiotic and it's been pumped into the cell through the membrane wall, the cytoplasm pumps might fail. So down here they fail. So therefore, the mutational antibiotics can't get in. Therefore, they don't die from it. But this is again, is this showing evolution here? This mutation, is this showing evolution? No. This is showing that the information that was present that created these good pumps has been mutated, so they stop working. So these creatures have a benefit, all right. The antibiotic can't get in, but they're nowhere near as good as what they were before the pumps malfunction. So that is not showing beneficial mutation or increase in information. Again, it's a loss. Is the creature evolving upwards? No, it's a downhill. What's actually happening is it's like a carver. Natural selection is only like a carver of on a sculpture where he's carving away the clay. Natural selection is acting upon the genes and it's carving away the genes, it's carving away. So it is not adding to the sculpture, it is taking away information from the sculpture. So evolution cannot do via natural selection what they want it to do. Actually, it's quite obvious. Anyway, let's have a look at what's actually happened with antibiotics. Information is losing information is being lost through mutations, and that's how they're becoming resistant. A mutation disables a control gene that regulates the production of an enzyme that destroys the antibiotic. This happens with penicillin, where the enzyme actually starts creating, it gets a mutation where it starts creating penicillinase, which gets rid of the penicillin. But this means it's producing more penicillinase, which means it's actually running it's like running your car where it's using more fuel. Yes, you can run it like that, but it's far more efficient when it's actually running properly. Well, the immunity to the penicillin is like running and using far more resources to produce the penicillinase, which does give it an advantage over penicillin, but it's running using so much more materials and effort that it's actually not going to be as good as the actual original cell in reality. So, but let's have a look at bacteria, because bacteria has been proposed as well. It's another one. Okay, Lenski, bacteria, has evolution happened in action? Well, apparently Linsky actually gave up trying. he was doing heaps of studies, and he started doing, he couldn't find even one simple adaptive trait developing. Okay, so he got pretty discouraged, but he started switching to simulations where he could get what he wanted using simulation software, computer simulation software. That's not exactly you know, if you can't do it with the bacteria, I think maybe the computer model is not going to be good for you. But anyway, he did get some success. Well, they thought. Something dramatic happened with after 33,000 generations. Since they're happening every 20 minutes, they're reproducing. It's like, instead of 20 years, there was an explosion an incredible increase here in the sample after 33,000 simulated generations. The actual population exploded in the bottle of these bacteria. You can see the results here. And this has been heralded as an amazing evolutionary feat. Okay, and so what's happened here, we've got the glucose, what normally the bacteria eat, and then these ones started eating the citric, citrate here, which these guys were normally eating this, and they exploded in their population because they could eat citrate. So was it evolution? Well, Dawkins claims this actually might be new information arising, because he's been looking for this new information. He needs uphill evolution, so he's been looking for it. Is it, as he claims, new information? Is this really what they've been looking for? Well, real chemistry actually explains what's happened. The ability to eat and process citrate was already present in all living organisms. So these bacteria already could eat citrate. It wasn't an evolved new information. It's only that in the certain cycle, it gets switched off where they don't eat the citrate, and so they they have to eat the glucose, and the cycle it's a switch when it's turned off. So what actually happened was, it's the Krebs citric acid cycle explains that yes, every creature's already been have the ability to eat the citrate, the bacteria. So it wasn't a newly evolved information, but the actual disabling mutation disabled the regulation of the on switch, which activates the Krebs citric acid cycle. So it was a mutation on the switch that switches it off, and so it's on all the time. So basically, there was a massive explosion because it's eating the citric all the time, but it's like running on full bore again. It's not optimized. Is it an added increase? Is there an added actual increase of information here? No. Again, it's a loss. It's losing its ability to switch off and on and be, conservative. So bacteria fails. So we've gone through that. Okay. Dawkins needs Darwinism for his atheistic beliefs. He says it intellectually fulfills atheists. It wasn't very... It's made being an atheist much better because of Darwinism. So he needs it. He's going to argue and never give in because he wants to believe it. There's issues with it though, isn't there? Morality. This man argues and says, but what about the problem? No basis for morality. And he says, well, tough. You just have to face it. He admits there is no basis for morality. What about Christianity? He says, well, the good things about Christians are they're not suicide bombers, and they might actually be a bulwark against something worse. And I think he's meaning Islam here. But the thing is, why isn't atheism the bulwark? Why isn't atheism stopping the spread across Europe of Islam and all terrorism and all that? Why is Christianity the one that's doing it? Because the truth is the truth. Christianity, love your neighbor. It is the truth, and that's the only thing that can stop this sort of thing. Atheism can't. By getting rid of it, he's actually going to be destroying society. Here's the problems he's found. He knows his complete mystery about the origin of life, how you get from inorganic to organic, from rocks to cells. He doesn't know about how sex can come about, how consciousness comes about, and morality. So there's big issues still he can't answer.